And you've just heard The Owl of Minerva, which is the opening track on the Tenementals album Glasgow, A History, Volume 1 of 6. And I'm joined now by David Archibald from the band. Hello, David.
Hello, Ali. Thanks very much for inviting me along. It's good to see you.
It's good to see you. And before we go into the rest of the album and the Tenementals more generally, let's talk about The Owl of Minerva. I have to say it's one of my favourite tracks of the year, and we could probably talk about that alone, I think, for the next while. So what's the kind of story behind it?
Well, I mean, the Tenementals, our project recently has been to try and develop a series of songs about the history of Glasgow. And the songs that we create, when we tell histories of the city, you know, the songs aren't just about in 1902, here's a little thing that happened, or here's another thing that happened back in the day. They're songs which invite people to think historically. So we do tell stories about marginalized events, things that maybe people don't know that much about, or certainly some people don't know that much about. But also we sing songs which are about history. Yeah. So I was walking along Minerva Street in Finnieston, maybe about 4 or 5 years ago. And I just noticed that, well, actually I was just struck by the name Minerva Street. So there's an aphorism associated with the philosopher Hegel that the owl of Minerva takes flight at dusk. And, you know, for reasons that I don't really know, reasons indiscernible, then my mind drifted, as your mind does sometimes when you're walking. A lot of the songs we develop start as a concept from walking about. Yeah. And my mind was just like, I wonder what it would be like if the owl Minerva was like on the Finnieston Crane. And then, yes, I wonder if it'd be like if she just flew off that and had a squint across the city, and what would she see? And maybe she would do that, and maybe she would write, maybe she would discuss what she thinks about the historical process. And basically that's the song. So the owl of Minerva flies across the city, north, south, east, and west, and says what she sees. And, you know, someone says to me, well, does she see all those things all at one and at the same time? And of course, when you write that, you don't worry about that. You know, if you're you know, afterwards I thought, well, maybe she can see all the pasts simultaneously. Yeah. Maybe she's got looking through a special crystal, or she's the owl of Minerva, so she sees everything. So what she sees is Glasgow in all its present and pastness, its presentness and its pastness, its complexities, processes that are at work, some visible, some not. And of course, the words put them together in some form of kind of kaleidoscopic integration rather than a kind of linear kind of explication. But basically that's what happens. She flies across the four parts of the city, and in each of the end of them, at the end of each chorus, a verse rather, she asks a question about what history is. If the past is simply random, non-systematic motion, why does it always settle into patterns of scarcity and oppression? Because there are some philosophers of history who do say, you know, there's no order in the past. Yeah. It's just chaos, and the only order that's in the past is put on it by human beings who impose an order on it. And then there are other historical perspectives which might say that there is an order in the past. And for instance, you might say that history is cyclical, that you always get the eternal return of the same. Or for Marx, you know, Marx would look at history and say, well, actually, if you look at history, it's the history of class struggle, that there's whatever one thinks about that there are patterns in the past. So the owl doesn't, she doesn't tell you what the answer is, of course. She just, but poses these questions. Of course, posing questions is never an innocent thing. It's the framing of a question always points people in certain directions. But basically, that's the origins of the song conceptually. And then the way we write some of our songs, at least, is that I've usually got a concept for the song, and I write down some lyrics. And then Simon, who's the guitarist in the band, Well, Simon's more than the guitarist in the band because him and I write the scaffold for the songs. And Simon also creates some of the artworks the artwork which is attached to the band, which a lot of people have said some very complimentary things. And me and Simon make the video. We're not just me and Simon. Me and Simon, we other people, but Simon's edited them and kind of put them together. And so Simon usually comes round to my house, and I've got a rough shape or some of the lyrics. I mean, I don't play any instruments. I'm maybe thinking about learning the tambourine or something just to do something on stage at some points. But so Simon comes round with his guitar, and I've got the words. He's put some chords together, and maybe sometimes between us we'll try and batter out some form of melody. And for that track, we had, that's how we kind of tend to work, and we tend to work quite quickly for an hour or two at the most, and then we have a couple of lemonades during that process. And after an hour, maybe 90 minutes, we feel in celebratory mode because we think we've created an amazing song. And then we head out to the Arlington bar and have another couple of lemonades and celebrate. And then the morning after, the night before, the brilliant song isn't as brilliant as it was, or we thought it was, but it's enough to push it forward. And then we do that process again, and we fine tune it, and the lyrics get fine tuned, and the structure of the song gets fine tuned. The melody will change, the chords will change. We don't write all the songs like that. There have been songs which I've written all the lyrics to, and I've fired them off to Simon in anticipation that we would, get up for a lemonade sharing session, and he's actually just fired back a piece of music with him singing over it. So that's only happened once, but usually it's a dialogical encounter between the two of us. And then we take the song, and then we take that which we have made between the lyric, the vocal, the guitar, and then we take it into the Chunky Studios, which is like Tenementals headquarters, where which is run by Ronan Breslin, who plays keyboards in the band. And then everybody in the band brings the different things that they have got to that. The band members come from extremely diverse musical backgrounds. So Simon's a punk rocker from Govan, and Bob and Mark are the bass player and the drummer, have been in bands for a long time. Let's just say a long time, and they're super tight. Bob plays in a number of bands. He plays in a jazz band, but he plays alongside Mark in a kind of alt country band, the Hellfire Club, and they're super tight. So they come from a different kind of trajectory. There's two cellists in the band, and so they come from classically trained musicians. Ronan plays keys. Ronan's been in countless bands and has been playing all sorts of instruments since he was knee high to whatever. And super talented sound engineer and keyboard player, but actually Ronan records the tracks, so a very talented and gifted individual. And who have I missed? Somebody, of course. I'll come back to that. Oh, so no,
see who you've got on the album.
Well, the thing is, in the album's complex because there's on the Owl of Minerva, Sophie Askew, who's an extraordinary harpist, played on the track. But Sophie lives in Edinburgh. It's very difficult for her to always come through. But Sophie's a professional musician, a professional harpist, and gives that track a little something else. There's a little something else there, particularly because of Sophie. Of course, the other people that we've been privileged to work with is a whole range of very talented and gifted singers. So Therese Martin has been singing with us. Sarah Martin's on the album same as Sarah's, well known for being a member of Bell and Sebastian. Jen Cunyon, who's sung with us, and she sings Passion Flares Lament, which we might go on to talk about.
Yeah, we will.
And she, Jen's been in one small band before, but she's got an incredible voice, but she's not really, she's probably sang more karaoke nights than she's ever sang in bands, but she was there just because I thought she was a brilliant singer. So and we've worked with other people. We worked with a very young singer called Lily Mohop, who sang a German song that we released, and I knew Lily's voice because she had sung on some films that a friend, an academic filmmaking friend of mine, had made, and I had heard her voice. And when we were singing, we decided that we were going to sing a German song at a striking workers' benefit gig. We sung it in part because we knew that we could ask Lily to sing it. So she's Scots German, and she sings like an angel. So, I mean, that's why I might forget people because there's a lot going on in the Tenementals, and it's not always kind of fixed and settled. And I've sort of drifted away from the Owl of Minerva, I'm afraid, but perhaps we have a bit of a drifting methodology. And maybe that kind of song comes out. The origins of that song does come out of sort of drifting through the city, just walking through the city and seeing what encounters, what happens, what does the city bring to you as much as what you bring to the city.
I think it's a great opening track for the album because it really kind of sets the scene as to what is to follow. And I also think, I'm right, kind of Hegel's referencing you can only really understand something once a time has passed. So there's that aspect of it as well, isn't it? You know, it references Glasgow in the here and now, but as you mentioned, the kind of past as well. And what also does, which really impressed me, was it gave a full picture. You know, it wasn't just perhaps the regular stereotypes. There was the areas which, you know, are wealthier than perhaps others. And often Glasgow doesn't necessarily talk about those, you know. So that it kind of, by the way you've done it, by having the owl take in north, south, east and west, you get a full picture of this city and its glory and otherwise.
Yeah, well, they're very nice words, Ali. Thank you very much. It's when you actually, I think you feel as if you have some commitment to, when you write a song like that, you can't cover all the bases, you know, and you've got a kind of commitment to the city in some way, you know. Of course, someone can come along and say, "Oh, you never mentioned this, or you never mentioned that." Of course, but I think what this song tries to do is cover the complexities, the fragments and the complexities, and cognizant that you can't really get to a totality, but perhaps you get to something else within those fragmented moments.
And so let's move on to the rest of the album. Talk a little bit about the themes and ideas on it. Clearly, Glasgow is a big part of it, but, you know, what did you want to explore about the city?
What we wanted to explore, I suppose, philosophically, or like, you know, from an academic, you know, I'm teaching the university. Some of the members are academics, some of them are not. And I've always had an interest in history. I mean, always since I was a kid, since I was at school and I was taught history by Mrs. Duncan at Elgin Street Primary School in Claybank. I was brought up in Claybank. And for me, an engagement with the past was always about learning about people who had fought back in some way. So it was always about understanding instances of exploitation and people trying to change the world. So whether that was like the Chartists or whether it was like about the Peterloo Massacre in 1819, these were things that as a schoolboy, I mean, a young schoolboy, when I encountered these things, I was like, wow, there was injustice, and there was injustice then, and people fought back. And that thing I've never lost that. I've never lost that, even although I'm not, certainly not, it's been a long time since I've been a teenager. So an engagement with the past for me is enriched when we get a sense of that. So what I wanted to do with that kind of project was to ask a question. You know, I've read many history books but I try and think about history in a more expanded way. And I was trying to think, if a rock band made history, what would it look like? What would it sound like? What would it feel like? What would it smell like? I mean, what would be and I mean, in academic terms, super academic terms, I'm interested in what you might call the ontology of epistemology, which is the beingness, what is the beingness of knowledge itself? What form does it have? And why is it that we might, I think that it's standard that, history should be written, and that history should be written in 68,000 word articles or in 60 to 80,000 word books. Now, of course, all those things are valuable, and I'm not saying that those things should not exist, but this project, or the Tenementals, asks the question that if we did it a different way, if we created an artistic history, what would we gain? What might be not better but different? What might we learn if we did it like this? Of course, we would lose some things, because writing and perhaps creates distance, and we get all these other things. But perhaps there's a poetic engagement with the past, which opens up other possibilities of knowing the past in a different way. So we don't know what the answer to that question is. We pose that question, and we want people to listen to the album and to give us an answer to that question about what they think about that. What we've said is, you correctly said there that the album is called Glasgow History Volume 1 of 6, and what we're why do we call it 1 of 6? Are we going to get to 6? Well, we might, and we might get to 7. We don't know. But at some point we'll finish, and it won't finish with a conclusion, because can only ever be a history of fragments. It'll only be fragmented, because we can't tell a totalizing history. The history that we create is unfinished, and we want it to be a collaborative history, in the sense that other people who encounter the Tenementals and make a history together with us, then we offer them an open hand. Here's an example, two ways that might emerge. So people have written to us about things that the songs have provoked with them, and written to us about things that are, were important to them back in the past. So the songs have for them began to make them think about history in some ways. And other people have written about, have created other artworks which were related to the songs. So they've listened to the songs and been inspired to do other things. And then other people have written to us and said, have you ever thought about writing a song about this?
Yeah.
So in that sense, the Tenementals history then begins to become a collaborative history. It's not a history that we own.
Yeah.
It's a history that we begin to try to make together with other people. And we've used this phrase, and I don't think it's cliched, or I hope it's not meant to be, which is that we think that if we can make a history together, then we think that we can make a future together. That we try to spend time with the past. We don't live in the past. We don't want to spend all our time in the library looking about what happened back in the day. But by spending time with the past, it can open up a better understanding of the past, but also of the present, and about why the world looks the way it does just now, and about why it might be ordered in a different way. So we're interested in radical pasts, but we're more interested in radical futures.
And in that way, what you're talking about, the band in general, makes sense in that it's not fixed. There's a flexibility about the band, about the musicians there, and there's a flexibility about the stories that will be told. And we've mentioned it already. In a moment, we're going to hear it, A Passion Flower's Lament, because it references a familiar Glasgow landmark, but perhaps the story behind it is less familiar. Could you talk a bit about that?
Well, the statue to the members of the International Brigades, which sits on the banks of the Clyde, is a figure commonly known as La Pasionaria, who was a very famous Spanish politician. She was a member of the Spanish Communist Party. She was very celebrated because in November 1938, she made what was generally regarded as a magnificent speech, a magnificent oration, to say kind of farewell to the members of the International Brigades. The International Brigades was groups of men men and women, primarily men, who had travelled from different parts of the world to fight in Spain against fascism and against what emerged as a dictator called Francisco Franco. So they were fighting on the side of a democratically elected left-wing government, which had come to power in 1936. And it's quite complicated, like all civil wars, complicated. But she was saying they were leaving before the war was completed. They were leaving. It was a kind of concession to attempt to try and make the forces from Germany and Italy, who were intervening on the side of fascist Spain. It was an attempt to get them to leave, and a concession to what we might have called the liberal democracies at the time, the liberal capitalist democracies like Britain, France, and the United States. So she's quite famous for that. And then she became, after Franco died, the dictator Franco died in 1975, and she returned as a member of the Spanish Spanish Parliament. So she sits on the Clyde like a communist angel, you know, and that space has become a gathering point for, you know, radicals. They go there to, you know, to maybe to meet, to go somewhere else, and it's a magnificent statue. It's got great presence, and the song is about when I was a teenager. I was in the Young Socialist, and I read all the books about Spanish Civil War and the Spanish Revolution and what took place there, and it was pretty murky, you know. And there was a kind of civil war within the Civil War, and people on the left were knocking off other people on the left. And, you know, and whatever one thinks about those debates, so the anarchists were arguing with the Trotskyists, and the Trotskyists were arguing with the Stalinists, and it was very controversial. And I suppose this figure is from one of those camps, you know. So the song's really, and it, you know, we dedicated to the song to a young man called Bob Smiley, who was a University of Glasgow chemistry student. And he travelled to Spain, and he fought alongside Orwell, but he wasn't in the international brigades. He was a member, and he was aligned with a kind of group of people in what was called the POUM, and he got killed. And it's, you know, it's uncertain why he was killed, but he was arrested and then he was killed. He was arrested and then he died. He was beaten up and he died, and it's certainly at least possible that he was killed by kind of people on the left, you know, his own forces. And I suppose what the song really asks the question. You come here and you stand, you know, you stand before me and you carry your spotless banner, and it's a little bit murkier, it's a little bit more complicated than perhaps you might have thought. But do you need to know that? Because the fascists are coming back. And they absolutely are coming back. So they're coming back in Spain, but they're coming back elsewhere. And the song's really about that. Do we need to know about the complexities of Spain because the fascists are coming back? And like artists generally, they don't give you an answer to that. Although again, the framing of the question raises it. But I suppose that's what is at the kind of heart of that little song. And I mean, it's sung so beautifully by Jen Cunningham. And what I love, if I recall correctly, it's the second track on the album. I'm not sure. But, so it comes after the Owl of Minerva, which is a massive. It goes from fourth gear to first gear, or whatever. It's just such a different shift in register. Someone said to me, or someone wrote the other day, you know. Someone had said, "Oh, I've never heard the Tenementals," and another guy said, "You don't just listen to one track and think you've got them, because because all the songs are different." And that was nice. I quite liked that, you know. So that song. I'm not in that song, you know. I sort of was involved in writing it with Simon, but when I listened to it. I listen to it somewhat relatively objectively, and it just breaks my heart when I hear Jen singing. It's just so beautiful, haunting, a lament, thought-provoking. We hope,
yes.
You know, we hope. We're just putting a little video together of it just now. We bring things out, and we're not very organised. We've got an irregular strategy for bringing things out. So I think you might bring out the video when you bring out the track. but we work on it. We work to a different beat. But we're working on that just now with some archive footage from Spain, some stuff that we shot in Spain, and the, you know, there's a castle in Catalonia in a little city called Castelldefels, and there it was the prison where they kept the dissident members of the international brigades. So, you know, we come and everybody goes, well, the international brigades, and of course they were all bloody. They went to fight, to die, many of them for what they believed in. But within that, there was people who were getting, you know, who were doing the wrong things within that.
Yeah.
So it asks that, it talks about that rather than just being interested in goodies and baddies.
Yeah.
You know, it's like history's more complicated than that.
Absolutely. And I'm aware we've only talked about 2 of the songs on it, which makes the point that there is so much more. And I totally agree with whoever said you've got to listen to all of the songs, because they're all different and they all have their own stories to tell, really fascinating ones. But before we go, we should say that you've got the launch of the album on Wednesday, the 27th of November. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, I mean, we're having a launch in Oranmore on Wednesday, the 27th of November. It's the 7 o'clock kickoff sharp. We'll open at 7:30, compared by the one and only Norrie Wilson. The name Norrie Wilson might not be that well known, but out with the people who do know and love him.
Aye.
But he runs the magnificent website with he has that magnificent social media profile connected to Lost Glasgow,
Yeah.
and he does a really brilliant job of hauling aspects of Glasgow's past and bringing it into the present. So Norrie's been a great supporter of the Tenementals since he came to our second gig, which was a benefit gig for striking workers in the Admiral Bar. He's a compere, and then at 7:30 he'll come on, say a few words, and he'll be followed quickly after by Monica Queen and the Sorrowful Mysteries. Oh, yeah. Monica, we've had the benefit, had the privilege of bringing out a track with Monica, and she sang with us live a year ago, just one track. So we'll see whether she sings that with us again, but she'll be playing with her full band. So she sometimes sings with her and Johnny, her partner Johnny, and Johnny mixed the tracks on our album. Big shout out to Johnny, who's a magnificent, talented man in many departments. So Monica and the Sorrowful Mysteries will be on. And then we'll be on. There might be 1 or 2 other things, but we're not sure, and maybe not. But the great thing about it is we got some funding from Glasgow City Heritage Trust, so it's free to enter. So it's a free gig. It's a Wednesday night. It'll start early and it'll finish early. It'll be done by 10, so it won't be a late night. We know it's a Wednesday. So come have a lemonade, and you get to see the Tenementals, whatever one thinks of them. It would be worth coming just to see Monica Queen and the Sorrowful Mysteries on their own. Monica Queen should be known. She should be a name which is on the lips of every person in Scotland. She's such a talented singer. So it would be worthwhile you know, for the free entry ticket money, going to see her on its own. But
absolutely. If you've never heard Monica Queen live, then that's definitely a reason to go down. But it's then to see the Tenementals as well. The icing on the cake. We're going to get both there. I can't wait to see these songs live, so I'm going to try my best to get down there. David, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Ali. I just want to give you a shout out as well, because you know, I want to thank the local radio stations like CamGlen, Sunnygovan, who've played the Tenementals right from the beginning. And actually, we've been getting played by small radios. We've been getting bigger plays as well, but we've been getting played by small stations in the States recently as well. And I think community radio stations do an absolute social job of introducing people who live in cities to music that they would otherwise not hear. So I want to thank you for that. I just realised that as I've been talking, it's been getting darker, and I'm looking as if I'm about to disappear apart from my head.
Well, thanks again, David. And this is the Tenementals and A Passion Flower's Lament.